We have senior journalist and advocate, Mr. Balaji. Mr. Balaji is a veteran journalist for the last 3 decades. He has been covering Supreme Court. Currently, he has been associated with a very prominent newspaper, Telegraph. So, welcome, Mr. Balaji, to our Legal Observer show.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Rastogi. Nice to speak to you.
Same here. So, Mr. Balaji, I want your expert opinion and your comments on this recent electoral bond judgment of Supreme Court. SBI, State Bank of India, has just approached Supreme Court on 4th of March to give them time for 5 months till 30th June to provide the information which Supreme Court has ordered them to submit by 6th of March to ECI, and ECI was supposed to put up that information on their portal. So how do you see this whole thing?
Yeah, one thing, it is both surprising and shocking. Surprising for the fact that SBI chose to move an application at the fag end of the deadline, giving very little time for even the matter to be listed before the Supreme Court. And second thing is, after having moved an application, normally there is a convention of making a mention before the Chief Justice of India for urgent listing. If this SBI was really concerned about the listing of the matter, they ought to have mentioned the matter for urgent hearing, which they did not do till date. Second thing, what is shocking is that SBI has filed this application for extension of time till June 30th, because by the time the Lok Sabha elections itself will be over. The Supreme Court was very categorical when it passed the February 15th judgment, saying that it wanted to ensure purity of the electoral process, because ultimately it is the common man who will be affected. And they wanted this anonymous donation issue to be totally decided by this judgment, by which they held the entire 2018 electoral bond policy as being illegal and unconstitutional. So the fact that the SBI choose to move it at the fag end of the deadline indicate that the SBI does not want to disclose it.
So in a way, the public opinion is being formed on this issue that SBI is actually acting under some pressure. It is the government which has pressurized SBI. Otherwise, SBI has no business to defy a Supreme Court direction.
Yeah, see, even SBI, let us assume if it is working under the pressure of the government, SBI, it is ultimately which will be liable for the consequence. It will be SBI, general managing director or the chairman or the higher echelons who will be responsible for this contemptuous behavior. Government is not going to be hauled up because the directive was to the SBI and it is for the SBI to comply with it. And being a public sector undertaking, which is actually a little away from the governmental control. So technically, there may be a certain element of administrative control of the government, but still SBI is an independent entity of its own. So it ought to have complied with it and set, it should be a role model for the others. If the government or its instrumentalities does not comply with the court's directive, how do you expect the common man in the street to follow the Supreme Court? And tomorrow, it should not be a case that every person start defying the way in which it is being done.
Yeah, बालाजी, but आपने तो देखा होगा, बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग फैक्ट उसमें है बाला साहब कि एसबीआई का जो एप्लीकेशन है वो एक एजीएम लेवल के आदमी ने साइन किया है. It is not even signed by the managing director. It is not even signed by the chairman. There is no sworn advocate affidavit by the highest authority. I mean, you are writing to the Supreme Court of India after the historical judgment, and you slept almost for 3 weeks, just one day before you woken up. So what is this whole mockery?
Yeah, bilkul, because it looks to be like they have scant respect for the Supreme Court, or they possibly want to make a lower level official the scapegoat for the entire investment. The higher echelons would try to escape the liability and instead pass on the buck to a lower level official like the AGM, who may be eventually hauled up. But the court, I think, will look through this and will summon or issue notices to the senior authorities to respond. But everything now, it's also
So you have a 3-decade experience covering Supreme Court. Now you are a qualified advocate also, you practice also. So technically, legally, what do you see? What should be the next step in this? When there is another ADR and Prashant Bhushan petition for contempt of Supreme Court is being filed, and they're being filed. It's not yet listed as such. So, what is your expert opinion? How the thing's going to be? Where it is going to be?
Yeah, I think it will. See, I don't think it will be a smooth cakewalk for the SBI, because they are bound to answer certain questions to be put by their constitution bench. Because we are here, they are not going to deal with a 2 or 3 judge bench. It's a constitution bench, which is the highest authority within the Supreme Court also. And then the ADR has raised certain valid grounds, saying that this has been done deliberately to ensure that the disclosure at all, if it is made, is done only after the Lok Sabha elections in June, in the month June. So they wanted the elections to be over. So now they have to address this issue. That apart, SBI and the government have been consistently saying that the entire electoral bond policy is to ensure transparency. When you talk about ensuring transparency, then you all have the detail, the entire data about the people who have donated and the people who are the beneficiaries. Everything is linked to your KYC. And since everything is linked to your Aadhaar and PAN card identity, I think you just need a fraction of a few minutes, not 4 or 5 months as being sought, fraction of a few minutes to disclose the identity.
So, any past reference you like to mention, or any precedent, or any previous this thing which you like to mention in such a scenario or such a situation in Supreme Court?
No, there were instances even when the then CPI acting director, Nageshwar Rao, if I'm not wrong, he was hauled up for contempt of the court by the Supreme Court. He was imprisoned for 1 day in the Supreme Court, made to sit throughout the proceedings as a mark of disfavor. Because had they convicted him for a longer time, it would have cost him his job also. Because there was a CBI official who misled the government on an important issue, following which he was hauled up for contempt and eventually. And if you recollect, some 20, 30 years ago, 25 years ago, the then Karnataka Chief Secretary was also hauled up and sent to jail for 30 days. I do not recollect his name, but he was the Chief Secretary of Karnataka at that time. And Supreme Court had the courage or the power to send him to jail for 30 days. At that time, even a lot of IAS officers went on protest against that, but they said nothing doing. You will face the consequences. So there are instances where Supreme Court had acted tough. Correct. But we'll have to see whether the violation is so egregious to warrant sending any of the top officials to the jail. But on this one, I could say, the last matter I can say that the Supreme Court at best may give them 1 or 2 weeks listen, but I don't think they are going to concede the request for a June 30th deadline. So let's watch for Monday proceedings. Yeah. By that time, things will be more clear.
Correct. Because the public aspiration from Supreme Court is really very high, and this is a high time for a country like us to ensure transparency and faith in the system. Otherwise, who would bother?
Yeah, absolutely. See, and electoral bonds, you have dispensed with the earlier system of disclosure, saying that you wanted to ensure transparency. And when you wax eloquent about your transparency, then be clear about it. You should disclose it in a jiffy. Even before the court's directive, you should be in a position to say that these are the people, these are the people. Because what we have found through our own investigations reveal that it is not a question of BJP or any political party. Whichever political party is in power, like in this at the center you have the BJP, but you have various regional parties or national parties at the state level. Those parties are also recipients of these electoral bonds. Absolutely. So it means the corporate house will eventually fund only those whom they think they can extract some their pound of flesh.
Correct. Thank you. So we look forward for the events unfolding in Supreme Court in next week. Thanks a lot, Balaji, and we keep.
Thank you, Mr. Manoj. Thank you for giving me an opportunity.
Yeah, I look forward to hear more from you as an expert in the time to come on the important Supreme Court events and judgments and matter of public interest. Thanks a lot.